We're on to chapter 13, so 52. It's 52 because that's how many people on this particular day are being sent to the guillotine. And in my book, it's page 335. I'm going to skip around a little bit, but just kind of follow along. So, in the black prison of the conciergerie, the doomed of the day awaited their fate. They were in number as the weeks of the year. 52 were to roll that afternoon on the life tide of the city to the boundless, everlasting sea. We've talked a lot about the ocean as a metaphor, so that is continuing now, and thinking about how the mob is really responsible for what's going on. So before their cells were quit of them, new occupants were appointed. Before their blood ran into the blood spilled yesterday, the blood that was to mingle with theirs tomorrow was already set apart. So Darnay is in his cell, and he's thinking it's the night before his guillotine. He goes to the guillotine, and he writes a couple letters. So if you flip over to 336, at the bottom paragraph, he says he wrote a long letter to Lucy showing her that he had known nothing of her father's imprisonment until he had heard it from herself, that he had been as ignorant as she of his father and uncle's responsibility for that misery until the paper had been read. He had already explained to her that his concealment from herself of the name he had relinquished was the one condition, fully intelligible now, that her father had attached to their betrothal or marriage, and was the one promise he still exacted on the morning of their marriage. He entreated her, for her father's sake, never to seek to know whether her father had become oblivious of the existence of the paper, or had had it recalled to him for the moment or for good by the story of the tower on that old Sunday under the dear old plane tree in the garden. That's where he had that weird look that he gave Darnay. If he had preserved any definite remembrance of it, there could be no doubt that he had supposed to destroy it with the Bastille, when he had found no mention of it among the relics of prisoners which the populace had discovered there, and which he had been described to all the world. He besought her, though, he added, that he knew it was needless to console her father, by impressing him through every tender means she could think of, with the truth that he had done nothing for which he could justly reproach himself, but had uniformly forgotten himself for their joint sakes. Next to her preservation of his own last grateful love and blessing, and her overcoming of her sorrow to devote herself to their dear child, he adjured her, as they would meet in heaven, to comfort her father. So that's the letter that Darnay writes to Lucy, and how he wants her to handle her father and his sadness about feeling, or guilt about feeling like he's put Darnay in this position. To her father himself he wrote in the same strain, but he told her father that he expressly confided his wife and child to his care. He told them this very strongly, with the hope of rousing him from any despondency or dangerous retrospect toward which he foresaw he might be tending. To Mr. Lorry he commended them all, and explained his worldly affairs. That done, with many added sentences of grateful friendship and warm attachment, all was done. He never thought of Carton. His mind was so full of others that he never once thought of him. So I always love this line, because obviously, it's clear to us now what's happening with this plan, and the irony is he's thinking of all these other people he needs to say goodbye to, except for the one person who was willing to die for him. He had time to finish these letters before their lights were put out. When he lay down on his straw bed, he thought he had done with this world. And then just jump down a paragraph. It says, thus, so now it's the next day, thus he had come through the hours to the day when the 52 heads were to fall, and now, while he was composed and hoped he could meet the end with quiet heroism, a new action began in his waking thoughts, which was very difficult to master. He starts to think about the literal act of going to the guillotine, and will he be first, will he be last, what will it sound like, what will it feel like, and so he's kind of doing that whole thing. And he's also, every time he hears the bell ring for the clock, he thinks I'll never see 11 o'clock again, I'll never see 12 o'clock again, and he's kind of wishing all the, saying goodbye to all the hours he'll never see again. So then just jump down on 338 to footsteps in the stone passage outside the door. He stopped. The key was put in the lock and turned. Before the door was opened, or as it opened, a man said in a low voice in English, "He has never seen me here. I have kept out of his way. Go you in alone. I wait near. Lose no time." So this is John Barsad. The door was quickly opened and closed, and there stood before him, face to face, quiet, intent upon him, with the light of a smile on his features and a cautionary finger on his lips, Sidney Carton. There was something so bright and remarkable in his look that for the first moment the prisoner misdoubted him to be an apparition of his own imagining. But he spoke, and it was his voice. He took the prisoner's hand, and it was his real grasp. Of all the people upon earth, you least expected to see me, he said. I could not believe it to be you. I can scarcely believe it now. You are not, the apprehension came suddenly into his mind, a prisoner? No, I am accidentally possessed of a power over one of the keepers here, and in virtue of it I stand before you. I come from her, your dear wife, Darnay. The prisoner wrung his hand. I bring you a request from her. What is it? A most earnest, pressing, and emphatic entreaty addressed to you in the most pathetic tones of the voice so dear to you that you well remember. The prisoner turned his face partly aside. You have no time to ask me why I bring it or what it means. I have no time to tell you. You must comply with it. Take off these boots you wear and draw on these of mine. So literally they start to switch clothes. There was a chair against the wall of the cell behind the prisoner. Carton, pressing forward, had already, with the speed of lightning, got him down into it and stood over him barefoot. Draw on these boots of mine. Put your hands to them. Put your will to them. Quick. Carton, there's no escaping from this place. It can never be done. You will only die with me. It is madness. It would be madness if I asked you to escape, but do I? When I ask you to pass out that door, tell me it is madness and remain here. Change that cravat for this of mine, that coat for this of mine. While you do it, let me take this ribbon from your hair and shake your hair out like this of mine. With wonderful quickness and with a strength both of will and action that appeared quite supernatural, he forced all these changes upon him. The prisoner was like a young child in his hands. Carton, dear Carton, it's madness. It cannot be accomplished. It never can be done. It has been attempted and has always failed. I implore you to not add your death to the bitterness of mine. So now, several times, over and over, Darnay is sort of stalling this plan, right? Because he keeps saying, like, there's no way to do anything about this. And so Carton has thought about how to deal with this, sort of knowing that Darnay would do this. Do I ask you, my dear Darnay, to pass the door? When I ask that, refuse. There are pen and ink and paper on this table. Is your hand steady enough to write? It was when you came in. Steady it again and write what I shall dictate. Quick, friend, quick. Pressing his hand to his bewildered head, Darnay sat down at the table. Carton, with his right hand in his breast, stood close beside him. Write exactly as I speak. To whom do I address it? To no one. Carton still had his hand in his breast. So remember, in his breast coat pocket, Carton has those 2 packets from the chemist that he's not supposed to mix, so he's hanging on to them right now. Do I date it? No. The prisoner looked up at each question. Carton, standing over him with his hand in his breast, looked down. So Darnay's sitting in the seat. He's going to write down whatever Carton tells him, and Carton's standing above him, which is important. You'll see in a second. And he's behind him. Have you written forget them? Carton asked. I have. Is that a weapon in your hand? No, I am not armed. What's in your hand? You shall know directly. Write on. There are but a few words more. He dictated again. I am thankful that the time has come when I can prove them. That I do so is no subject for regret or grief. As he said these words with his eyes fixed on the writer, his hand slowly and softly moved down close to the writer's face. So he's, behind him, and he's getting his hand like close to Darnay's mouth like this. So he's going to drug him or, sedate him so that he passes out. The pen dropped from Darnay's fingers on the table, and he looked about vacantly. What vapor is that? He asked. Vapor? Something that crossed me. I'm conscious of nothing. There can be nothing here. Take up the pen and finish. I lost my spot. Hurry. As if the memory were impaired or his faculties disordered, the prisoner made an effort to rally his attention. As he looked at Carton with clouded eyes and with an altered manner of breathing, Carton, his hand again in his breast, looked steadily at him. Hurry. The prisoner bent over the paper once more. If it had been otherwise, Carton's hand was again watchfully and softly stealing down. I never should have used the longer opportunity. If it had been otherwise. The hand was at the prisoner's face. I should have had so much the more to answer for, if it had been otherwise. Carton looked at the pen and saw it was trailing off into unintelligible signs. Carton's hand moved back to his breast no more. The prisoner sprang up with a reproachful look, but Carton's hand caught him firm round the waist. For a few seconds he faintly struggled with the man who had come to lay down his life for him, but within a minute or so he was stretched insensible on the ground. I love that line. So, two reasons why Carton has him do this. One, to write a letter to Lucy. So the letter is, even though it's written by Darnay, it's Carton's sentiments to Lucy so that she understands why he did what he did. And then reason number two is to keep Darnay busy so that Carton could sedate him. So now, there was no way Darnay was just going to walk out the prison door and be like, oh yeah, sure, like let's switch. So this was the only way it was really going to work. Quickly, but with hands as true to the purpose of his heart was, Carton dressed himself in the clothes the prisoner had laid aside, combed back his hair, and tied it with the ribbon that the prisoner had worn. Then he softly called, "Enter here, come in," and the spy presented himself. "You see," said Carton, looking up, as he kneeled on one knee beside the insensible figure, putting the paper in his breast, "is your hazard very great?" "Mr. Carton," the spy answered with a timid snap of his fingers, "my hazard is not that. In the thick of business here, if you are true to the whole of your bargain, don't fear me, I will be true to the death. You must be, Mr. Carton, if the tale of 52 is to be right. Being made right by you in that dress, I shall have no fear. Have no fear, I shall soon be out of the way of harming you, and the rest will soon be far from here. Please God. Now get assistance and take me to the coach." "You?" said the spy nervously. "Him, man, with whom I have exchanged. You go out at the gate by which you brought me in?" "Of course. I was weak and faint when you brought me in, and I am fainter now you take me out. The parting interview has overpowered me. Such a thing has happened here, often and too often. Your life is in your own hands. Quick, call assistance." So, my lights. This is the reasoning for why Darnay, or like Carton, aka really Darnay, is passed out. That, a lot of people, when they go to say goodbye to loved ones, they would faint and pass out. And so that's the story they're going to tell when people ask why Carton, has fainted or passed out. "You swear not to betray me," said the trembling spy as he paused for a last moment. Man," returned Carton, stamping his foot. "Have I sworn by no solemn vow already to go through with this, that you waste the precious moments now? Take him yourself to the courtyard you know of. Place him yourself in the carriage. Show him yourself to Mr. Lorry. Tell him yourself to give him no restorative but air, and to remember my words of last night, and his promise of last night, and drive away." The spy withdrew, and Carton seated himself at the table, resting his forehead on his hands. The spy returned immediately with two men. "How then," said one of them, contemplating the fallen figure, "so afflicted to find that his friend had drawn a prize to the lottery of St. Guillotine?" "A good patriot," said the other, "could hardly have been more afflicted if the aristocrat had drawn a blank." They raised the unconscious figure, placed it on a litter they had brought to the door, and bent to carry it, aka Darnay, away. "The time is short, Evermond," said the spy in a warning voice. "I know it well," answered Carton. "Be careful, my friend, I entreat you, and leave me." "Come then, my children," said Barsad. "Lift him and come away." The door closed, and Carton was left alone. Straining his powers of listening to the utmost, he listened for any sound that might denote suspicion or alarm. There was none. Keys turned, doors clashed, footsteps passed along distant passages. No cry was raised or hurry made that seemed unusual. Breathing more freely in a little while, he sat down at the table and listened again until the clock struck 2. So 2 is the time that he knows that everybody was leaving, so he feels like, they've gotten away with it. So in comes a jailer and says, "Follow me, Evermond." And I'm just jumping down a paragraph. So they gather all the 52 people that are being sent to the guillotine into a room together before putting them in the carts or the tumbrils to the guillotine. So as he stood by a wall in a dim corner with some of the 52 were brought in after him, one man stopped in passing to embrace him as having a knowledge of him. It thrilled him with a great dread of discovery, but the man went on. A few moments after that, a young woman with a slight girlish form, a sweet, spare face in which there was no vestige of color, and a large, widely open, patient eyes rose from the seat where he had observed her sitting, and came to speak to him. This is very important. "Citizen Evermond," she said, touching him with her cold hand, "I am a poor little seamstress who was with you in La Force." He murmured for answer, "True. I forget what you were accused of. Plots, though the just heaven knows I am innocent of any. Is it likely who would think of plotting with a poor little weak creature like me?" The forlorn smile with which she said it so touched him that tears started from her eyes. "I am not afraid to die, Citizen Evermond, but I have done nothing. I am not unwilling to die if the Republic, which is to do so much good for us poor, will profit by my death. But I do not know how that can be, Citizen Evermond, such a poor, weak little creature." As the last thing on earth that his heart was to warm and soften to, it warmed and softened to this pitiable girl. I heard you were released, Citizen Evermond. I hoped it was true. It was, but I was again taken and condemned. If I may ride with you, Citizen Evermond, will you let me hold your hand? I'm not afraid, but I am little and weak, and it will give me more courage. As the patient eyes were lifted to his face, he saw a sudden doubt in them, and then astonishment. He pressed the work-worn, hunger-worn young fingers and touched his lips. She knows that this is not Darnay. Are you dying for him? She whispered. And his wife and child. Hush, yes. Oh, you will let me hold your brave hand, stranger. Hush, yes, my poor sister, to the last. So there are a lot of things we will talk about or have talked about in class with this seamstress. So she's this little tiny character. We never even really know her name. We'll see her only one other time in the book. But this moment is one of those little big moments that I feel like we've talked about a couple times now, right? Where the reason this is so huge is that she's recognizing him in a way that nobody else ever has, right? We know he doesn't get the credit. Stryver gets the credit. Other people get the credit. He even gives the credit to Laurie for saving them all recently, right? But in this moment, she recognizes what Carton is doing for this family and how huge it is. And it's nice, I think, that he gets that recognition before he goes to the guillotine. So then there's a space on the page. We pan over to the rest of the crew that is escaping France. So it says, the same shadows that are falling on the prison are falling in the same hour of the early afternoon on the barrier with the crowd about it when a coach going out of Paris drives up to be examined. Who goes there? Whom have we within? Papers? The papers are handed out and read. Alexander Manette, physician, French. Which is he? This is he, this helpless, inarticulately murmuring, wandering old man pointed out. Apparently the citizen doctor is not in his right mind. The revolution fever will have been too much for him, greatly too much for him. Ha, many suffer with it. Lucy, his daughter, French, which is she? This is she. Apparently it must be. Lucy, the wife of Evermond, is it not? It is. Ha, Evermond has an assignation everywhere. Lucy, her child, English, this is she? She and no other. Kiss me, child of Evermond. Now thou hast kissed a good Republican, something new in thy family. Remember it. Sidney Carton, advocate, English, which is he? He lies here, in this corner of the carriage. He, too, is pointed out. Apparently the English advocate is in a swoon. It is hoped he will recover in the fresher air. It is represented that he is not in strong health and is separated sadly from a friend who is under the displeasure of the Republic. Is that all? Is it not a great deal that? Many are under the displeasure of the Republic and must look out at the little window. Jarvis Lorry, banker English, which is he? I am he, necessarily being the last. It is Jarvis Lorry who has replied to all the previous questions. It is Jarvis Lorry who has alighted and stands with his hands on the coach door, replying to the group of officials. They leisurely walk around the carriage and leisurely mount the box to look at what little luggage it carries on the roof. The country people hanging about press nearer to the coach doors and greedily stare in. A little child carried by its mother has its short arms held out for that it may touch the wife of an aristocrat who has gone to the guillotine. Behold your papers, Jarvis Lorry, countersigned. One can depart, citizen, one can depart. Forward, my postilions, a good journey. I salute you, citizens. And the first danger is past. So they make it past that first checkpoint. They are again the words of Jarvis Lorry as he clasps his hands and looks upward. There is terror in the carriage, there is weeping, there is heavy breathing of the insensible traveler. Are we not going too slowly? Can they not be induced to go faster? Asked Lucy, clinging to the old man. It would seem like flight, my darling. I must not urge them too much. It would rouse suspicion. Look back, see if we are pursued. The road is clear, my dearest. So far we are not pursued. So then they continue to travel. I'm just going to turn the page to 346. It says, Ho, within the carriage there, speak then. What is it? Asked Mr. Lorry, looking out a window. How many did they say? I do not understand you. At the last post, how many to the guillotine today? 52. I said so. A brave number. My fellow citizen here would have had it 42. 10 more heads are worth having. The guillotine goes handsomely. I love it. High forward, whoop. The night comes on dark. He moves more. He is beginning to revive. So this is Darnay. And to speak intelligibly. He thinks they are still together. He asks them by his name. what he has in his hand. Oh, pity us, kind heaven, and help us. Look out, and see if we are pursued. The wind is rushing after us, the clouds are flying after us, and the moon is plunging after us, and the whole wild night is in pursuit of us. But so far, we are pursued by nothing else. So it seems like, they escape from, my screen just went black. It seems like they escape, and they make it out. And then there are just 2 chapters left.